When the hostess led our family into the private dining room at the exclusive French restaurant, my eyes immediately counted the place settings. 12 chairs, 12 crystal glasses. But there were 13 of us. My mother-in-law smirked, while my husband casually chuckled. Oops, looks like we miscounted seats. Guess someone has to sit at the bar. The snickers around the table confirmed what I already suspected. It wasn't a mistake. They had deliberately left me without a chair to put me in my place. I didn't cry or argue. I just smiled, looked my husband in the eyes, and said, "It seems I'm not family after all." I picked up my clutch and walked out. 30 minutes later, as their appetizers were served, every single credit card on our shared account was declined, and the reservation holding the room was instantly canceled. Have you ever turned the tables on entitled family? Comment your city below so I can see where you're listening from. My name is Samantha. I'm 34 years old, and for 6 years, I was the dutiful daughter-in-law who swallowed every insult in the name of keeping the peace. As a senior director of logistics, I make a very comfortable living, far more than my husband, Julian, whose corporate middle management salary could barely support his champagne tastes. But because Julian's mother, Eleanor, came from old money and treated anyone with a middle-class background like hired help, I was constantly subjected to her passive-aggressive jabs. Still, for Eleanor's 70th birthday, I wanted to do something unforgettable. I spent weeks organizing an exclusive evening at a 3-star Michelin French restaurant, personally securing the private dining room and putting down a massive deposit to ensure everything was perfect. When we arrived at the venue, the atmosphere was dripping with luxury. The host led our group of 13 into the private room, where crystal chandeliers reflected off polished mahogany tables. But as I approached the setup, my stomach dropped. I counted the place settings. 12 chairs, 12 napkins, 12 custom menus. "Excuse me," I said softly to the waiter. "It looks like we're missing a seat." Before the waiter could respond, Eleanor let out a dainty, theatrical chuckle. "Oh dear. It seems there's been a slight miscalculation." Julian didn't even look at me. He just laughed along with his mother, clapping his hands together. "Oops. Looks like we miscounted seats. Guess someone has to sit out at the public bar." Snickers rippled around the table from Julian's snobbish relatives. They all knew I had planned the entire night. They knew I had paid for the room. Yet they sat there, watching me stand while everyone else took their seats. Julian gave me a casual, dismissive shrug. "Come on, Sam. Don't make a scene. It's Mom's big night. Just grab a stool out in the lounge." In that single, quiet moment, years of trying to earn their respect completely evaporated. I didn't yell. I didn't shed a single tear. I just looked Julian dead in the eye, adjusted my clutch, and said, "It seems I'm not family after all." Then I turned around and walked out into the cool night air. The valet handed me my keys, but I didn't drive away immediately. I sat in the driver's seat of my SUV, watching the soft ambient glow of the restaurant's private dining window. My hands were completely steady. For 6 years, I had financed Julian's soft landing into high society. I paid the mortgage on our home, covered his credit card balances when he wanted to impress his friends, and handed over thousands to ensure his mother's birthday would be talked about for years. They thought my quiet nature was weakness. They believed that because I loved Julian, I would endure any humiliation just to keep a seat at their table. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson about logistics. I pulled out my phone and dialed the restaurant's direct line. Because I had organized the entire event, the manager answered almost instantly. "Good evening, Mrs. Vance," he said warmly. "Is everything to your satisfaction in the private suite?" "Actually, Marcus, there's been a change of plans," I said, my voice dripping with calm authority. "I am the sole owner of the corporate black card used to reserve the room, pay the $5,000 security deposit, and guarantee the minimum spend for tonight, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Everything is registered strictly under your name and business account." Effective immediately, I am canceling the reservation, I declared softly. I am revoking authorization for any charges on my card. Furthermore, I am withdrawing the deposit. Please inform the table that the private room is no longer reserved, and any food or wine already ordered must be paid for immediately on a new card. Before Marcus could even process his surprise, I opened my banking app. With a few swift taps, I froze every joint credit card tied to my primary account. I removed Julian as an authorized user from my line of credit, leaving him with only his meager personal checking account, which I knew for a fact contained less than $400. I started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove to a sleek rooftop lounge 2 blocks away. I ordered a glass of vintage Cabernet, leaned back against a plush velvet booth, and waited for the fireworks to begin. Inside the private dining room, Eleanor was mid-toast, holding up a glass of $200 crystal champagne, boasting to her wealthy friends about her family's impeccable taste. Julian was sitting beside her, laughing off my departure as a temporary mood swing, assuring everyone that I would cool down and come back later to apologize. That was when Marcus, the general manager, stepped quietly into the room accompanied by 2 imposing floor supervisors. He didn't offer a polite smile. Instead, he walked straight to the head of the table where Julian sat. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said, his tone icy and strictly professional. "I'm afraid there is a severe problem. The primary cardholder, Mrs. Vance, has officially canceled this reservation and revoked all payment authorizations. The private room guarantee, the tasting menus, and the reserve wine you've opened are no longer covered." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. Eleanor's glass froze halfway to her lips. "What nonsense is this?" she hissed, her face flushing crimson. "My daughter-in-law is just throwing a childish tantrum. Charge her card anyway." "I cannot, ma'am," Marcus replied firmly. "The card has been frozen and authorization pulled. As of right now, your table owes $6,400 for the room minimum and services rendered. Unless this bill is settled immediately, we will have to vacate the private suite and contact law enforcement for theft of services." Julian's smug smile completely vanished. Panicking, he pulled out his wallet and handed Marcus his personal credit card. Marcus ran it through the mobile reader right at the table. Declined. Julian tried his secondary corporate card. Declined. He tried his personal debit card. Insufficient funds. The snobbish relatives who had just been giggling at my expense began shifting uncomfortably in their seats, staring at the tablecloth. Eleanor frantically pulled out her own purse, but her store credit cards were useless here, and her primary card hit its daily transaction limit halfway through the balance. Suddenly, the grand matriarch and her favorite son were standing in the middle of an elite establishment, exposed as total frauds in front of their entire social circle. Julian's hands were shaking uncontrollably as he reached for his phone and dialed my number, his voice cracking the moment I answered. "Sam, what did you do? You need to unlock the accounts right now. They're going to call the police." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine before answering, letting the background noise of the rooftop lounge hum quietly through the speaker. "I didn't do anything, Julian," I said, my voice smooth and utterly devoid of emotion. "You told me I wasn't family. You laughed while your mother made sure I didn't even have a seat at the table. So, I simply removed myself and my money from the equation." "Sam, please." Julian stammered, his voice hushed and frantic as he tried to hide his humiliation from the restaurant staff standing over him. "This isn't funny. The manager is standing right here. They're threatening to press charges. Just transfer the money or unfreeze the black card." "Why would I pay for a dinner I wasn't invited to enjoy?" I replied. "You wanted to play the big, successful man in front of your family. You wanted to let your mother treat me like garbage. So go ahead, Julian. Use your own money to pay for your mother's lavish party. Show everyone what a great provider you are." I could hear Eleanor shouting hysterically in the background, accusing me of sabotaging her special night. But the reality was crashing down on all of them. Julian was forced to do the one thing his bloated ego could barely survive. He had to go around the table, hat in hand, begging his snobbish relatives to chip in cash and split the bill across 6 different credit cards. The very relatives who had snickered at my expense 5 minutes earlier were now furiously whispering, furious that they were being forced to pay hundreds of dollars out of pocket for a dinner they thought was free. Their illusion of old money elegance completely dissolved into a chaotic, embarrassing squabble right in front of the restaurant staff. When Julian finally stumbled home late that night, pale and exhausted after enduring the absolute worst night of his life, he found the locks had already been rekeyed by an emergency locksmith. His designer suits, shoes, and luggage were neatly stacked on the front porch inside garbage bags. Sitting on top of the pile was a formal letter from my divorce attorney, detailing a complete freeze on all joint assets and notice to vacate the property. He stood on the porch, banging on the door, but I didn't even bother looking out the window. The man who wouldn't give me a seat at his table no longer had a place in my house. The divorce moved quickly after that night. With all the original purchase documents for the house, the luxury vehicles, and the investment accounts clearly proving they were acquired through my independent income, Julian had virtually no legal ground to stand on. He was forced to move into a tiny, one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, struggling to cover his basic living expenses on his modest salary alone. Eleanor's social standing took an irreversible hit. Word of the scene at the French restaurant spread rapidly through her country club circle. The story of how she tried to humiliate her daughter-in-law, only to end up unable to pay for her own birthday meal, became the ultimate piece of gossip. The very elite society she had spent her life trying to impress now viewed her family as desperate pretenders. For me, cutting that toxic tie was the most liberating decision I've ever made. I poured my energy entirely into my career and my own peace. My business thrived, and I eventually bought a stunning waterfront home where the doors are always open to people who actually respect and value my presence. I learned a vital lesson that night in the restaurant. Never fight for a seat at a table where you are respected. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting angry or creating a scene. It's simply taking your power, your dignity, and your resources back, leaving entitled people to face the reality of their own actions. Have you ever had to stand up to an entitled spouse or in-laws who thought they could walk all over you? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out the next video popping up on your screen for more satisfying revenge stories. Thank you so much for watching.